They snacked on danger. They dined on death. They had the shoulder pads, the face paint, the haircuts, and the mask to intimidate anybody that they stepped in the ring with. Enhancement talents would actually see their names against these two and would say, we'll just take our bags and go elsewhere. We do not want to get destroyed. You had 275 pounds in the Hawk, 290 pounds in the Animal, and you had Precious Paul Ellering as their manager, in the ring and out of the ring. They were the Road Warriors. They captivated audiences all over the world, and for well over a decade, they were the most dominant force in tag team wrestling. When people ask, who is the greatest tag team in the history of professional wrestling? Well, I'm John Renton with my review, WWE and A&E Biography, WWE Legends, the Legion of Doom, aka the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, who are no longer with us. Precious Paul Ellering is still here. A host of other talking heads were able to lay out this story that at least sort of told us why they were the best tag team ever, at least in my personal opinion and the opinion of others. By the way, my number 2 team of all time is the Steiner Brothers, just so you know. And yeah, this really didn't tell us a ton that we didn't already know. It dived into more about like Hawk's issues. I gotta be honest, so I think the Dark Side of the Ring that was on the Road Warriors was better. The Last Ride of the Road Warriors, I believe is what it was called. And that was only 45 minutes. They did have good talking heads on this, but don't pull up no chairs. This ain't gonna take too long. I'm gonna talk about a few things that they did leave out. But we start out at the 2011 Hall of Fame in Atlanta. We get Dusty, introducing him, and Dusty, of course, the spike in the eye thing that led to him not being the booker for WCW, and then he started his own promotion, then went and wore the polka dots, and got sick of it. But the talking heads, not same as it ever was, same as it ever was. We got archive footage of Hawk and Animal, which does make sense considering Hawk has been dead since 2003 and Animal has been dead since 2020 and hadn't been really giving a ton of interviews. I don't know when those interviews were done for Dark Side of the Ring. It had to have been like 2018, 2019. Paul Ellering, various family members I'll talk about. Julia, Animal's second wife, was really, really good in this. Nikita Koloff was a standout as well. It was really nice to hear from him. Hawk's issues did take them down early, and yeah, I mean, he shouldn't have been doing that. It's actually a miracle that Hawk lived to be 46. It is a fucking miracle. Rich and Dan, who were Hawk's brothers, who were on Dark Side of the Ring, got a chance to flesh the story out a little bit more. They talked about Hawk's childhood. I did like how Scott Norton was on the Dark Side of the Ring. By the way, check out my Dark Side of the Ring reviews if you want to hear what I thought about that stuff. But I'll probably keep occasionally referencing that. Animal's daughter, Jessica, she actually was really good in this, too. She got to talk about her son a little bit later on, who was obviously Animal's grandson. It was really nice to actually see the continuation of legacy. No, nothing from James. Nothing from John Laurinaitis, oddly enough, the dirty pervert that he is. Hopefully he's rotting away. And Nancy, Animal's first wife. You know, she got mentioned a little bit and actually got a couple interview pieces. And even she admitted they married young and they meant well and they still cared for each other, but it didn't work. They did have a son, Joey, who Joe Animal was still in the life of. Joe Animal just sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like the name of like some weird band from like Australia. Here's Joe Animal and with Bananarama underneath or something, but they got divorced in 1982, Joe and Nancy, that is. At least that Nancy escaped the clutches of wrestling, unlike another one. Yeah, dark, don't care. Hawk's father, he was a good provider, but wasn't necessarily a good, like a proper affectionate man. The mother did die at age 57. And that affected the family, obviously. That is something like where, you know, parents dying young like that, you don't necessarily get to see the next generation. I never actually got to meet my dad's mother. She passed away well before I was ever born. That is a regret that I do have. I don't know how good of a person I imagine she was a pretty good person since my dad turned out really well, but I always do kind of wish I had been able to, but, you know, rest in peace, Grandma. 2005 Animal clips, Grandma B's stuff. They didn't really go too much into that. You'll have to check out, I don't remember. It's the 2005 Road Warriors documentary. I don't remember. No, that's Cheating, Death, Stealing Life is the Eddie Guerrero one. It's on the WWE Vault channel, the Legion of Doom Road Warriors one. We see one brief thing of Ole, where Ole saw the Mad Max movie, said Rosenberg. I'm not saying that Ole wasn't aware of some cultural stuff, but I don't know if Ole necessarily saw that. But he needed another tag team. I'm going to explain why they left out a few things here in a little bit. Trained by Eddie Sharkey, who, at least as of the dark side of the ring, was still alive. I imagine he probably is dead now, because he had to have been 90 at that point. So they mentioned nothing about Hawk in Vancouver, I believe for Al Tomko, but they mentioned that in Dark Side of the Ring. Nothing about Animal as the Road Warrior, who was like a biker, whatever the hell he was, in Georgia as a single. He actually went back to do some bouncing because he could make more money there. And Ole then, wanted to know what the hell happened. Eddie said, here, like, well, you're looking for him. Oh, well, no, that's Mike. And he said, there's two of these guys. So Ole had the bright idea to bring Hawk and Animal and as a team, or Joe and Mike. They mentioned nothing about why Joe and Mike needed to be brought in as a team. Arn Anderson and Matt Dirty Pervert Bourne were known to were supposed to be the next hot team. Matt Bourne, however, got involved with, allegedly, covering my ass here, even though the fucker's dead and burning in hell, not that I really care if his family sees this, an underage girl of some variety. I don't know if it was quite an art bar situation, but still. Yeah, so Matt Bourne had to leave the goddamn territory, and then thankfully was able to leave wrestling, and, granted, after Doink. But that being said, that is why Hawk and Animal were created as a team out of necessity. So, I do want to apologize, by the way, if I sound a little bit rough. It is because of a massive swing in temperature and overworking. I am run down, but that is why I'm doing this and trying to be as level-headed as possible to get this content out to you guys. I also don't know if they're doing any more WWE biographies for this season. If they are, next week is Double or Nothing. I think I'm going to review that, so I don't think I'm going to end up reviewing whatever the biography is, but we'll see. Dark Side of the Ring reviews, by the way, will be happening, whenever I'm able to outside of work and, whatever else life throws at me. But Ellering talks about being their manager, not just in the ring, but out of the ring. And Ellering was able to, he was really, really smart, really able to help them balance their spending and stuff like that and figure out their taxes. And the Iron Man, song being their theme, it really fit. I mean, if you can find clips either on Twitter or on YouTube of them in Japan, listen to when Iron Man hits and listen to that fucking crowd. They absolutely go batshit for them. So, basically, they just jumped around a whole bunch with stuff and everything. Hulk talking about, he was watching Hawk and Animal in 83. No, he fucking wasn't. I'm not saying he wasn't aware, maybe he didn't go back and watch some tapes, but I refuse to fucking believe, even with the lighter schedule that they had in the AWA, with him making shots in Japan, and especially when the Road Warriors debuted in Georgia sometime in the summer of 83, I believe. I think it was the summer of 83. Hogan was making more shots in Japan, was wrestling, I believe, Inoki, and was about to make the return to WWE. So I just refuse to believe that Hogan, the liar that he is known to be, or was, thankfully, was watching them. That being said, Georgia, AWA, Crockett, and Japan. Yeah, Japan didn't really get mentioned. It got mentioned later. Rosenberg is an idiot, by the way, I just want to say. Old Bill Watts footage, he would bring them in for shots. And then Hawk and Animal would talk about, or did like a little, I believe, Rumble promo. I think it was a Wrestle Rock Rumble promo. Look up AWA Wrestle Rock Rumble rap. If you think that It's terrible. It's terrible. Nick Bockwinkel is like the only good part of that whole thing. So anyway, yeah, Hawk was a partier. It was a conflict between them. And this really was just a lot about Hawk's issues. David Crockett talks about, oh, well, at the height of the Cold War in 1985, which, even by that point, I'm not... Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Reagan smash. Reagan smash. I think... See, Nikita was challenging Flair on the night of Great American Bash 85, while it was Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev who become Barry Darsow. By the way, nothing about Demolition in this being Road Warrior ripoffs. They focus so much on Hawk's issues, they could have spent a few minutes on Demolition, but I digress. Maybe they'll do a Demolition biography, maybe while they're both still alive. So, the Road Warriors were turned face, when they faced the Russians, ignoring the fact they were already getting cheered heavily even in the AWA. It's hard not to cheer those guys because they were just insane. Crockett Cup 86, nothing about the scaffold match where Jim Cornette fell so fast. Good old Bless Ray trailer. Can't wait for Dark Side of the Ring. Where Cornette popped his ACL. So, during this time, by the way, they wanted more money. Crockett was willing to give them some kind of guarantee, but they wanted to see if Vince would. Vince was against giving guarantees, even though I promise you he was giving Hogan and Savage and even Piper guarantees by that point. But he got a guarantee, or they got a guarantee from Jim Crockett, $500K a year for 3 years. Now, if I'm right, I think I was sometime in 87, so I was going to run out sometime in 1990. And Hawk kept partying. Plenty of partying footage. We got plenty of that. We didn't get anything about them, being super over and everything. They could have spent a couple minutes on the Midnight Express feud. They could have done more with the Crockett footage because they spent so much time on Hawk's issues, which I get. I understand you want to focus on that, but you still could have sprinkled in some more wrestling stuff. So Julia, Animal's second wife, who I do have to say, again, terrific, really offered a lot of good insight here. They had James and Jessica. Nobody's going to get that unless you're an MST3K fan. Joe's more of a family man. Mike cared, but he had demons. Rick Steiner did chime in saying he was making some money, but not a ton, and he owed some back taxes, and Mike just gave him money to help out with his back taxes. Mike did have some ODs where he should have died. Collision with an 18-wheeler, and he walked away from it. Falling into an icy, body of water and seeing a pin light that actually was the flashlight, and he swam back and got back to the light, go into the light. This time it actually worked. Nikita was emotional about that, and you know what? That was actually a nice story. I'll say that. Even if it was hyperbole, it was all right. Starrcade 87, yeah, they beat Arn and Tully for the tag titles. No, they fucking didn't. They didn't switch titles, and that killed Chicago. And they also took Starrcade out of Greensboro, so yeah, that didn't work too well. Now that I think about it, I am going a little bit long on this, but I'm talking about stuff that they left out. Learning the Ropes sitcom. Go Google, or rather YouTube, Learning the Ropes, the sitcom. I want to see some terrible acting. Okay, it's like Ted Arcini trying to win an Oscar. So, Hawk's interviews, well, and, then they even show, I believe it was Nightmare on Elm Street 3. What a rush. You're all my children now. They skipped over how, the spike in the eye thing they did with Dusty, the various things that they did in the lead up to that, turning heel just before that, and the stuff with Dusty, but nobody wanted to boo the Road Warriors because Dusty probably shouldn't have kept putting himself in the top spot like that. But they ended up leaving in 1990, right after a Capital Combat 1990, I believe. The return of RoboCop, because that's what WCW needed in 1990. I'm upset that Jim Herd is still alive, as so many greats are still, or have come and gone. I don't know if Jim Herd's necessarily a bad guy, but he was bad for wrestling. So then we get to the WWF days, and we get Sean Mooney. Who? Good old Bobby Heenan. And Bruce Pritchard, the known liar that actually was more level-headed in this than I thought. They talk about the LOD name. We can't use Road Warriors because that's something from a movie, but we could talk about Legion of Doom. Legion of Doom is from a cartoon, by the way. I think it was He-Man. The He-Man? No, Super Friends. Super Friends. Not He-Man. That was something that Ellering said in the Dark Side. I watched too much Dark Side, and I've actually got Dark Side brain rot. So, Mike was good to the fans. There was actually a really sweet moment where he was talking about getting tickets for a guy in a wheelchair and his friends. That was nice. That was nice to see. Hogan talking about excess. That's funny. The guy that never apologized for being racist just apologized for what you said on camera. And, he saved Hawk from falling in, or, sleeping at the bottom of the pool and drowning. Now, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know. Hawk was on a lot of shit. But, given the fact that Hogan didn't like being near bodies of water for jet ski accidents, I'm amazed he wanted to even go near a pool. So, in all seriousness, 1992 was it. SummerSlam 92 was it. But then they go backwards. They could not figure out this timeline. It was pissing me off. Hawk failed drug test in May of 91. Later on in 92, I believe that's why they missed WrestleMania 8. Well, they missed it as far as having a match. Footage of Hawk spiraling. Now we go to SummerSlam 91 where they win the tag titles from the Nasty Boys, who won them from the Hart Foundation at WrestleMania 7. I think they won it from that because they never got to have the big match with Demolition. But then again, Bill Eadie was really broken down by that point. So, Zuba's pants. They made a lot of money from that. Zuba's pants were butt ugly. I will continue to say that, but they made a lot of money and they were everywhere. Literally. As somebody that was born in 1981, even as a kid, in middle school, junior high, those Zuba pants were everywhere. I don't know if they necessarily were everywhere by high school, but for a few years, those ugly-ass striped things were everywhere. They brought in Paul Ellering in 92, and Rocco the Dummy, and nobody liked it. Even Bruce said it was stupid. And it was. Because it's a ventriloquist dummy. It's like a midget. You don't need a midget. You don't need a ventriloquist dummy. You don't know where they've been. Short people got no reason to, well, anyway. The dummy's driving the bike, McMahon. That's the only good thing that came out of Rocco. Bless Bobby Heenan. I wish his health hadn't declined. He was still around, had a podcast. 80K at SummerSlam. I believe that more than the 93,173 at WrestleMania 3. Hawk was not in good shape at this point, though Sean Mooney said this was the beginning of WWE going global. And I love Sean Mooney. I don't think Sean Mooney knew his history. Because what? They were so hot in the UK before this. They were doing co-promoted shows in the Tokyo Dome in 90 and 91. They had this global footprint before that. I mean, yes, it's a big fucking deal. They got, 80,000 in Wembley. But still, it wasn't the beginning of them going global. It was the beginning of them going to, the UK more and more to save the fucking company because Vince torched the goddamn, goodwill he had with the fans. Well, Hogan did, and Vince caught it by proxy. Like bringing in the dirty pervert Mel Phillips again. Glad he's dead. So, Hawk was very high. Brett said that Hawk wasn't well, talking about taking Placidyls or whatever it was. So they beat Money Inc. They were apparently supposed to face the Natural Disasters or whoever the tag team... I think the tag team champions were the Natural Disasters at that point. Some of that's a little bit muddy to me. I usually know this, but some of these years are a little bit muddy. Also old. But Hawk took off. He was either with the London's Hells Angels or something. He was last in Amsterdam. Hawk quit. Animal, his back got hurt. He was very hurt and frustrated he was emotionally hurt by the fact that Hawk did what he did. Hawk went to Japan. They briefly mentioned Kensuke Sasaki and Ken Sasaki is what they said. Because I guess the other name was too hard for Mr. Rosenberg to pronounce. And Power Warrior is what they called Sasaki. Animal took time off. He spent time with his family. They had a reunion. And they did have a brief run in WCW. They got completely skipped the fuck over. But Hawk realized that he did mess up, but Hawk's demons continued to have a hold of him. So Kofi chimed in. It was cool to see them back. LOD did have some cool moments in 97. Won the tag titles. I think Henry Godwin broke his goddamn neck, if I remember right. Was it Henry or Phineas? I think it was Henry. Phineas Godwin, living proof of what happens when first cousins marry. Oh, bless JR. So, Hawk's Demons in the 1998 angle. Nobody liked it. Sean Waltman, who is open and honest about, his issues and everything and has gotten clean. Good on him. He hated it. Everybody hated it. Family hated it. Hawk wanted to do it because he wanted to pay Vince back. Like, give back to Vince for the shit he put him through. But still, Draws was brought in. Poor Draws. Bless Draws. It's terrible that he had that accident. It was not D'Lo's fault. It was just an accident. And it's unfortunate that the Draws passed away. It wouldn't have worked anyway, even if they hadn't done this thing with Hawk. But they pushed Hawk off the Titantron. I hated that. I absolutely fucking hated that. That was terrible. And things petered out by spring of 99. I actually forgot that they had Draws and Animals still teaming up. It wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. And it wasn't Draws' fault. It was creative. I blame Russo and Ferrara for that. Then again, I'll blame Russo and Ferrara for everything that was bad about the Attitude Era. Because they could have had some good ideas, but using the addiction, pushing somebody off the goddamn Titantron, and they live. By the way, they actually did, come back briefly in 2003 that they skipped over. But we get to the tour in Australia in 2000 where Hawk nearly dies. Hawk asks Animal to take him out of the hospital, fly him back. Okay, you're on your own, pal. I'm going away. So Hawk met a woman named Dale. Apparently she was the inspiration for Pitbull's saying, bet you didn't expect a Pitbull fucking reference on this show. And yeah, Nikita Koloff got emotional over this part because it was like a Christian Power team thing. I don't remember what it was. He invited Joe, Animal, and he said, can Mike come? And, well, it's this and this. Yeah, but let me ask him. He wants to come, why not? And Mike got saved. And look, I hate religion with a passion. I will always say that. If you do it the right way and you understand their teachings and it's not factual and you use it for the right reasons and you use it to help yourself, fine. I'm not saying it absolves that, but if you live in a good way, okay, and you help people, there we go. And it seemed like Mike always wanted to help people. He just ended up he just has demons. So, he, was doing well with Dale. They had that brief return, good pop in 2003. I believe it was against Kane and RVD on Raw. I think they had one other match on SmackDown. And that was in May of 2003. Now, they could have had a nice little run. But on October 19, 2003, Hawk passed away. He had helped Dale move some stuff. Laid down, and his body gave out. That's just what it was. He couldn't control his demons. Even when he finally said it was enough, that was it. Everyone was hurt. I felt bad for the family. And we go to 2011 Hall of Fame. We thankfully skipped over the Heidenreich portion of the LOD. Oh boy. And Animal's ill-fated singles run, despite the Lloyds of London thing that he had where he could only wrestle tag matches. And then Animal died in 2020. And Ellering never got a chance to say goodbye, even though he got to see him like a month before. Jessica was emotional talking about her dad passing. And montage of clips. It could have been so much more than it was. There were moments on this that were cool. And it was nice to see LOD clips, Road Warrior clips, on a mainstream broadcast in 2026. But this didn't tell us a lot of shit that we didn't already know. And I think they could have just done more with the Crockett stuff. Definitely more with the AWA stuff. It's a shame they couldn't have done more with the Japan stuff, but there's more they could have done. That being said, despite the fact that Animal was photographed later wearing the hat of the now criminal piece of shit in the White House, and yes, I will say that if I'm going to say that about others, they are still, him and Hawk are the greatest tag team in the history of professional wrestling. one of the biggest box office attractions. I'm not saying they were the best technically. God, I don't even think they would say that. But for drawing power, for impact, and for copycat and whatever, they are people that they are matches that I will always go back and watch. Like, I can go back and watch anything that LOD did, even the squash matches, even the stuff in Crockett. If I can find stuff from Japan, they just had, somebody put up like something, it was like a clip, it was like a series of clips. It was Road Warriors and somebody against the Steiners and Scott Norton. I don't remember who the other person was. Might have been Sasaki now that I think about it. But yeah, just when Sasaki might actually be the least important of anybody in the grand scheme of things, but when he's there and he still hits with tremendous power, when you could just see something like that, and that was well into their run, that's the kind of impact that they had, and they were super over in Japan, and again, greatest tag team of all time. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Ritlin, and yeah, after a couple more reviews, guys, I am going to probably be taking most of June off, but I will be back for Dark Side of the Ring in July and August. That being said, well, happy trails to you.